The crystal chandeliers cast fragments of light across the grand ballroom like scattered diamonds, and somewhere beneath their glow, a woman's heart was breaking into pieces no one bothered to count. Evelyn Hart stood near the towering ice sculpture, her champagne untouched, watching the elegant chaos of a wedding that felt more like a fever dream than a celebration. The bride, Madison Clark, had been her closest friend in high school, or so Evelyn had believed for nearly 2 decades. Now, surrounded by silk tablecloths and imported roses, Evelyn wondered if friendship had ever meant what she thought it did. She had driven 4 hours from her small apartment in Newark to reach this estate in the Hamptons, spending money she did not have on a dress she would probably never wear again. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, addressed in gold calligraphy, and Evelyn had cried when she opened it. Not from joy, but from relief. After years of growing apart, of unanswered messages, and cancelled plans, Madison had remembered her. Madison had wanted her there. How foolish that hope seemed now. The laughter reached her first, sharp and familiar, cutting through the string quartet's melody like glass through silk. Evelyn turned toward the sound and found them gathered near the champagne fountain. Madison, resplendent in her designer gown, flanked by Jessica and Brittany, the inseparable trio that had ruled their suburban high school with carefully manicured cruelty. They were, looking directly at her, making no effort to hide their amusement. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She smoothed the front of her dress, a simple navy blue number she had found on clearance, and considered walking over to join them. Perhaps she had misread the situation. Perhaps they were laughing at something else entirely. She was halfway across the marble floor when their voices became clear. Madison spoke first, her tone dripping with theatrical pity. She tilted her head and pursed her lips in mock concern as she told the others to look who actually came, pointing out that she honestly thought Evelyn would be too embarrassed to show up. Jessica leaned in with a smirk, asking where Evelyn had found that dress, wondering if there was a sale at some discount store. Brittany did not bother to lower her voice, as she observed that some people never change, noting that Evelyn looked exactly the same as she did in high school, still desperately trying to fit in where she did not belong. Evelyn stopped walking. The champagne glass trembled in her hand, and she realized with horrible clarity that every guest within earshot had heard. A woman in pearls glanced at her with something between pity and disdain. A man in a tailored suit looked away, uncomfortable with witnessing such casual cruelty. Madison noticed her standing there and smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. She called out to Evelyn with false warmth, saying she was so glad Evelyn could make it, and asking if she was enjoying herself. The question hung in the air like poison. Evelyn wanted to respond. She wanted to say something clever, something devastating, something that would wipe that smile from Madison's perfect face. But her throat had closed around the words, and all she could manage was a tight nod before turning away. She walked toward the nearest exit, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that matched her racing pulse. The ballroom suddenly felt suffocating, the perfumed air, too thick to breathe. She passed tables laden with food she could not afford, decorations that cost more than her monthly rent, guests whose jewelry could pay off her student loans twice over. The terrace doors stood open, letting in the cool evening air, and Evelyn pushed through them without looking back. The gardens stretched before her in manicured perfection, illuminated by strings of fairy lights that turned the hedges into golden corridors. She followed a stone path without knowing where. It led, wanting only to put distance between herself and the humiliation burning in her chest. The tears came when she reached a fountain at the garden's center, a marble sculpture of intertwined figures surrounded by roses. She sat on the edge and let herself cry, her shoulders shaking with sobs she had been holding back for longer than she could remember. It was not just tonight. It was every night she had spent alone in her apartment, every job application that went unanswered, every reminder that life had not turned out the way she had hoped. She was 32 years old, single, working as a receptionist at a dental office, and still wearing discount dresses to weddings where people laughed at her behind champagne flutes. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, asking when she was going to make something of herself, and Evelyn had no answer. The footsteps approached softly, almost imperceptibly. and she did not notice them until a voice spoke from the shadows. A deep voice asked if she was all right, carrying a quality that made her freeze mid-sob. Evelyn looked up, wiping hastily at her cheeks, and found a man standing at the edge of the fountain's glow. He was tall, with dark hair, and features that seemed carved from something harder than the marble beneath her. His suit was impeccable, clearly custom-made, and he held himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in any room. She recognized him instantly, though she had only seen his photograph once, tucked into the corner of the wedding invitation. This was the groom. This was the man Madison Clark had managed to capture with whatever combination of beauty and ambition had brought her to this estate. Evelyn scrambled to her feet, embarrassed to be caught crying by the one person who should have been inside celebrating his own wedding. She managed to say she was fine, apologizing and explaining that she just needed some air, congratulating him on the wedding. He did not acknowledge the congratulations. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, like he was reading something written beneath her skin. He observed that she was crying, then stated that she was not fine, his voice carrying not accusation, but simple statement of fact. Something about his directness loosened the knot in her throat. She heard herself admitting that no, she supposed she was not fine, but adding that it did not matter, that she should not have come, and that she was going to leave. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving her face. He asked why she was leaving, pointing out that she had only just arrived. Evelyn laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. She told him she did not think she was the kind of guest his bride wanted at her wedding. Understanding flickered in his dark eyes, followed by something that might have been anger, though it was not directed at her. He asked what happened. She should have lied. She should have made an excuse, and walked away, found her car in the vast parking area, and driven back to Newark where she could nurse her wounds in private. But something about this stranger made honesty feel inevitable. She explained that she grew up with Madison, that they were best friends once, that she came here thinking maybe that meant something, but she was wrong. Her voice broke slightly as she added that she was just someone they liked to laugh at, that she always had been, but she was too stupid to see it. The groom was silent for a long moment, processing her words with an expression she could not read. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried a weight that made her pay attention. He said he was sorry, that no one deserved to be treated that way, especially not at an event that was supposed to be about love and celebration. Evelyn blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. She told him it was not his fault, that Madison was his bride, and she loved him. Something shifted in his features, a hardening around the jaw, a cooling in his eyes. He said that Madison loved a great many things, mostly his name and what came with it. Before Evelyn could process that statement, before she could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted from the direction of the ballroom. Raised voices carried across the garden, followed by the sound of something shattering. The groom's expression changed instantly, all softness vanishing behind a mask of controlled authority. He told her to stay there, that he would be back, and then he was moving toward the house with a stride that somehow managed to be both unhurried and urgent. Evelyn watched him disappear through the terrace doors, her heart pounding for reasons she did not fully understand. She should leave. Every instinct told her to find her car and drive away from this strange night before it became stranger still. But something kept her rooted to the fountain's edge, some curiosity she could not name, some feeling that walking away now would mean missing something important. The minutes stretched like hours. The commotion inside grew louder, then suddenly stopped. Silence descended over the estate, heavy and expectant, broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain behind her. When the groom returned, he was not alone. Two men flanked him, broad-shouldered and expressionless, wearing the kind of earpieces Evelyn had only seen in movies. They stopped at the garden's edge, while he continued forward, his face unreadable in the fairy-light glow. He asked if she was still there, his voice softer than before, almost surprised. Evelyn nodded, unable to find words. Something had changed in the air between them, some shift in the dynamic she could not identify. He told her the wedding was over, that guests were leaving, and that it seemed Madison had made some choices that could not be undone. He paused, then added that he could have someone drive her home if she wanted, or she could stay. Evelyn stared at him, confusion and curiosity warring in her chest. She asked what he meant, what had happened. He did not answer directly. Instead, he extended his hand, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. He said his name was Dominic Santoro, and that he had a feeling they had more to talk about than either of them realized. The name hit her like cold water. Santoro. She had heard that name whispered in news reports, mentioned in hushed tones by colleagues who followed local crime stories, connected to businesses that operated in shadows most people pretended not to see. Evelyn looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, searching for some sign of threat or danger. She found only patience, and something else beneath it, a loneliness that mirrored her own. Against every rational thought in her head, she placed her hand in his. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. This story is just beginning, and trust me, you will not want to miss what happens next. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single chapter of this journey. The estate sprawled before Evelyn, like something from a dream she had never dared to have. Dominic led her through corridors lined with artwork that probably cost more than her entire education, past rooms filled with furniture that looked both ancient and immaculate. The two men who had accompanied him in the garden were nowhere to be seen, though Evelyn suspected they were never far away. She should have been terrified. Everything she knew about the Santoro name suggested she had just placed her hand in that of a very dangerous man. But fear was strangely absent from the emotions swirling through her chest. Instead, she felt something closer to anticipation, as if she had stepped through a door into a story that was finally worth telling. Dominic brought her to a sitting room with tall windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. He gestured toward a velvet sofa and asked if she wanted anything to drink, maybe tea or something stronger. Evelyn chose tea, more because she needed something to do with her hands than because she was thirsty. She watched him move to an intercom panel on the wall, speaking quietly to someone on the other end, and tried to organize the questions crowding her mind. When he returned, settling into an armchair across from her, the silence between them felt less awkward than expectant. He was waiting for her to speak first, she realized, giving her control of the conversation despite everything about this situation suggesting he held all the power. She asked what happened inside, what he meant when he said the wedding was over. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He explained that he discovered some things about Madison that made continuing the ceremony impossible, things he should have known before but had chosen not to see. Evelyn absorbed this, thinking of Madison's cruel smile, her casual cruelty, her talent for hiding ugliness behind beauty. She said she was sorry, that it must hurt to find out someone you were going to marry was not who you thought. He studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. He said he appreciated her kindness, but pointed out that she was the one who was hurt tonight, that she came here expecting friendship and found mockery instead. The tea arrived, carried by a young woman in a simple black dress who moved with the silent efficiency of someone trained to be invisible. Evelyn accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. She admitted that she should have known better, that Madison had always been like that even when they were young. She had just hoped people could change. Dominic leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. He said that some people could change, that he had seen it happen, but it required wanting to change, and some people were too comfortable with cruelty to give it up. Something in his voice made her look up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since they had entered the room. There was weight behind his words, the kind that came from personal experience rather than philosophical musing. She asked about him, whether he had changed. The question surprised him. She could see it in the slight widening of his eyes before he controlled the reaction. He was silent for a long moment, considering his answer with more care than such a simple question seemed to warrant. He finally said that he had tried, that he was still trying, that the world he had grown up in did not encourage change, but he had learned there were things worth becoming different for. Evelyn wanted to ask what things. She wanted to know the full story behind those cryptic words, wanted to understand how a man with the Santoro name could speak of change as if it were something precious and difficult. But a knock at the door interrupted them, and one of the broad-shouldered men from the garden entered with an apologetic expression. The man addressed Dominic formally, apologizing for the interruption and explaining that there was a situation that required his attention, something involving the arrangements for the evening. Dominic's expression hardened into the mask of authority Evelyn had glimpsed earlier. He nodded once and turned to her, his voice softening as he spoke. He apologized, explaining that he needed to handle something, but that she was welcome to stay as long as she wanted. He would have Elena show her to a guest room if she was tired, or she could explore the library if she preferred. He promised to find her when he was finished. Before Evelyn could respond, he was gone, moving through the door with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested whatever situation awaited him was not trivial. She sat alone in the beautiful room, her tea cooling in her hands, wondering what exactly she had gotten herself into. The library called to her. Evelyn had always loved books, had spent her childhood hiding from the world between their pages, and something about this night made her crave that familiar comfort. She found it 3 doors down from the sitting room, a 2-story wonder of leather-bound volumes and rolling ladders that made her breath catch in her throat. She wandered the aisles, trailing her fingers along spines that ranged from ancient to modern, finding first editions nestled beside contemporary bestsellers. The collection was eclectic and personal, clearly curated by someone who actually read, rather than someone who wanted to appear cultured. She was reaching for a worn copy of Jane Eyre when a small voice startled her. A young voice asked if she liked that one. Evelyn spun around and found a girl standing in the doorway, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair that matched Dominic's and eyes that held the same quiet intensity. She was wearing pajamas decorated with tiny stars, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Evelyn stammered that, yes, she did like it, that it was one of her favorites. She introduced herself and asked who the girl was. The girl stepped into the library with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She said her name was Sophia, that she was Dominic's niece, and that she lived there with him since her parents went to heaven. The casual way she delivered this information made Evelyn's heart ache. She knelt down to Sophia's level, meeting her eyes directly. Evelyn told Sophia she was sorry about her parents, that it must be hard. Sophia shrugged with the resilience of children who have learned to carry heavy things. She said it was sad sometimes, but that Uncle Dom took care of her, that he read to her every night before bed and made pancakes on Sundays. She added that he was not scary like people think. Evelyn smiled despite herself. She said he did not seem scary to her either. Sophia's face brightened. She said she was glad, then asked if Evelyn would stay for pancakes tomorrow, explaining that Uncle Dom made really good ones with chocolate chips if you asked nicely. Before Evelyn could answer, footsteps approached in the corridor and Dominic appeared in the doorway. His expression shifted when he saw them together, something warm replacing the cold authority he had worn moments before. He told Sophia it was past her bedtime, asking what she was doing out of her room. Sophia ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist with obvious affection. She explained that she heard someone in the library and wanted to see who it was, and that Evelyn was nice. Dominic looked at Evelyn over Sophia's head, and something passed between them, some acknowledgement of a connection neither had expected to find tonight. He agreed that Evelyn was nice, then told Sophia to say good night, and he would come tuck her in soon. Sophia obeyed, offering Evelyn a small wave before disappearing down the corridor. Dominic watched her go, and when he turned back, the mask was entirely gone. He looked tired but genuine, more human than he had seemed all evening. He apologized, saying Sophia was usually in bed by now, but the commotion from the wedding had kept her up. Evelyn set the book back on its shelf and approached him carefully. She told him not to apologize, that Sophia was wonderful, and asked how long she had been living with him. Dominic leaned against the doorframe, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He said it had been 2 years, that his brother and his wife had been in an accident, and that Sophia had no one else. The pieces were coming, together in Evelyn's mind, forming a picture far different from what the Santoro name suggested. This was not just a powerful man in a dangerous world. This was a man who made pancakes for his orphaned niece and kept a library full of books he clearly loved. She told him he seemed like a good uncle. His laugh was quiet and self-deprecating. He said he tried, that Sophia deserved better than what life had given her, and that he was doing his best to make sure she never felt unwanted. Evelyn thought of her own childhood, of feeling perpetually out of place, of searching for belonging in friendships that had never truly welcomed her. She said Sophia was lucky to have someone who cared that much. Dominic studied her face with that penetrating gaze she was beginning to recognize. He said it was late, and that she should rest, that the evening had been difficult for both of them. He told her Elena had prepared a guest room and that they could talk more in the morning if she wanted to. Stay. She should have declined. She should have asked for that ride home, returned to her small apartment and her small life, and forgotten this strange night had ever happened. But Sophia's invitation echoed in her mind, and something about Dominic's tired eyes made leaving feel impossible. Evelyn told him she would like that she would like to stay. His smile was small but genuine, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. He said good night, and that he would see her. In the morning, then he went to tuck Sophia in. The guest room was larger than Evelyn's entire apartment, decorated in soft blues and creams that felt like being wrapped in a cloud. She stood at the window, looking out at the gardens where her night had turned upside down, and tried to process everything that had happened. She had come to a wedding expecting to reconnect with old friends. Instead, she had been mocked, comforted by a stranger, and somehow ended up spending the night in a Mafia boss's estate. Life had a strange sense of humor, but beneath the absurdity something else was stirring, a feeling she was afraid to name but could not ignore. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of dark eyes and unexpected kindness, of libraries and little girls, and the possibility that some stories were only just beginning. The morning light filtered through silk curtains, painting the room in shades of gold that made everything feel unreal. Evelyn woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her, before the memories of the previous night came flooding back. She found clothes laid out for her, simple but elegant pieces that fit perfectly, despite no one having asked her size. Someone on this staff was either very observant or very good at guessing. She dressed quickly and followed the smell of coffee to a sun-drenched breakfast room where Sophia was already seated, chattering happily to Dominic, while he placed a plate of chocolate chip pancakes in front of her. The domestic scene was so at odds with everything Evelyn had expected that she stopped in the doorway, uncertain whether to interrupt. Sophia spotted her first and called out excitedly that Evelyn had stayed, then told Uncle Dom that she had told him Evelyn would stay. Dominic turned, and his expression when he saw her made something flutter in Evelyn's chest. He said good morning and asked how she slept, then told her to sit and that he made extra. She took the seat across from Sophia, accepting the coffee he poured with murmured thanks. The pancakes were indeed excellent, fluffy and sweet, and she found herself wondering how many other surprises this man contained. Sophia dominated the conversation, telling Evelyn about her school and her friends and her favorite books with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely had a new audience. Dominic watched them interact with quiet contentment, occasionally adding comments that made his niece giggle. It was only when Sophia finished eating and ran off to get dressed that the atmosphere shifted. Dominic set down his coffee cup and met Evelyn's eyes with renewed seriousness. He told her they should talk, that there were things she deserved to know before she decided whether to leave. Evelyn's pulse quickened, but she nodded, prepared to hear whatever truth he needed to tell. He began by asking what she knew about his family, about the Santoro name. She admitted she knew enough to know the name carried weight, that there were stories and rumors. She was not naive about what kind of world he lived in. He accepted this with a slight nod. He explained that his family had been involved in certain businesses for generations, that some of those businesses were not legal, and that he had inherited responsibilities he never asked for. But he said he had spent the last 5 years trying to change things, to redirect their interests into legitimate enterprises, to build something Sophia could be proud of when she was old enough to understand. Evelyn listened, watching his face for signs of deception and finding none. She asked why he was telling her this, why he trusted her with something so personal. His answer was simple and devastating. He said he did not know, that something about her made him want to be honest, that he had spent so long wearing masks that meeting someone who made him want to remove them felt significant. The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with implication. She told him she was nobody, just a receptionist from Newark who had been crying at a fountain. She asked what he could possibly see in her. Dominic reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers with unexpected gentleness. He said he saw someone who had been hurt, but had not let it make her cruel. Someone who looked at his niece with genuine kindness without knowing who she was. Someone who sat in his library choosing Jane Eyre when she could have tried to find secrets. Evelyn's breath caught. No one had ever seen her so clearly, had ever looked past the surface to find something worth describing. She asked what happened with Madison, what he had discovered that ended the wedding. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by cold anger that she understood was not directed at her. He explained that Madison had been working with people who wanted to destroy him, that the wedding was a strategy rather than a romance, designed to get close enough to gather information that could bring down everything he had built. Evelyn absorbed this, thinking of Madison's calculating smile, her talent for manipulation that had been evident even in high school. She said she wished she could say she was surprised. Dominic's laugh was bitter. He admitted he should have seen it sooner. That loneliness had made him blind. That he had wanted so badly to believe someone could love him for himself rather than his power. Without thinking, Evelyn turned her hand over, intertwining her fingers with his. The gesture surprised them both, but neither pulled away. She told him she understood that loneliness, that she had spent her whole life wanting to belong somewhere, wanting someone to see her as enough. They sat in silence, hands joined across the breakfast table, two lonely people recognizing something familiar in each other. The moment was broken by Sophia's return, dressed in a bright yellow sundress and demanding they all go see the horses. Neither adult protested, both grateful for the interruption, before the intensity between them became too much to navigate. The stables were immaculate, home to 6 horses that Sophia knew by name and personality. She introduced each one to Evelyn with the seriousness of a diplomat presenting foreign dignitaries, explaining their quirks and preferences, while Dominic watched with obvious affection. Here, away from the weight of names and expectations, they were simply 3 people enjoying a sunny morning. Evelyn helped Sophia brush a gentle mare named Starlight, learning that the girl had inherited her uncle's love of animals along with his dark hair. Dominic leaned against a stable door, offering commentary that made them both laugh, his severe features transformed by genuine happiness. It was easy, Evelyn realized with some amazement. Being with them was easy in a way nothing in her life had ever been. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she did not feel the need to perform or pretend or prove herself worthy of inclusion. She simply was, and that was enough. The days began to blur together after that first morning. Evelyn called in sick to her dental office job, then called again, then stopped calling altogether. Her apartment in Newark felt like a distant memory, a life that belonged to someone else. The estate became her world, and its inhabitants became something she was afraid to name. She learned the rhythms of the household, the staff who kept everything running with quiet efficiency, the security team, whose presence was constant but unobtrusive, the various associates who came and went on business she did not ask about. Dominic was transparent about the legitimate aspects of his work, showing her the real estate developments and the investment portfolios that now formed the core of Santoro interests. The shadows he kept to himself, and she did not push. Sophia attached herself to Evelyn with the fierce devotion of a child who had learned too young that love could be taken away. She wanted Evelyn to read her bedtime stories, to help with her homework, to watch her ride the horses and tell her she was doing well. Evelyn gave all of this freely, discovering in herself a capacity for nurturing she had never had the chance to explore. And Dominic. Dominic watched her with those dark eyes, finding reasons to be wherever she was, creating moments of connection that left her breathless. They talked for hours in the library, sharing histories and dreams and fears. They walked the gardens. At twilight, their shoulders brushing with increasing frequency. They built something fragile and precious, neither willing to name it for fear it might shatter. If you are watching this story and feeling something stir in your heart, leave a comment saying, "I believe everyone deserves to find where they belong." This is your sign that this story is touching you the way it is meant to. Comment now and let me know you are here. 2 weeks into her stay, Evelyn found herself in the kitchen past midnight, unable to sleep and craving the chamomile tea she had discovered in the pantry. She was not expecting to find Dominic there, sitting in darkness with a glass of something amber, staring at nothing. She asked if everything was all right, her voice soft with concern. He looked up and she saw exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He said no, that everything was not all right, that he had received news that changed things. Fear gripped her chest. She sat across from him, reaching for his hand without hesitation. She asked what kind of news. He explained that Madison had not been working alone, that she was part of something larger, a network of people who wanted to see him destroyed. He said they had been patient for years, placing people in his life, gathering information, waiting for the right moment to strike. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She asked what they wanted. Dominic's jaw tightened. He said they wanted everything, his businesses, his properties, his reputation. They wanted Sophia left with nothing. Growing up knowing her family name was synonymous with disgrace, the protective rage that surged through Evelyn surprised her with its intensity. She would not let that happen. She refused to let anyone hurt Sophia or destroy what Dominic had worked so hard to build. He looked at her with something like wonder. He asked why she cared, why any of this mattered to her. She did not have to think about her answer. She told him it mattered because he mattered, because Sophia mattered, because in a few short weeks this place had become more of a home than anywhere she had ever been. The space between them seemed to collapse. Dominic raised his hand, brushing his fingers along her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. He told her he had not expected her, that when she appeared crying in his garden he thought she was just another person passing through his life without leaving a mark. He said he had been wrong, that she had left marks everywhere, in his house and in Sophia's heart, and somewhere he had thought was too armored to be touched. Evelyn leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. She told him she had spent her whole life feeling invisible, unimportant, easily forgotten. She said he had made her feel like she mattered. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she instead moved closer, wrapping her arms around his neck, he deepened the kiss with a passion that stole her breath. They stayed in the kitchen for hours, talking between kisses, planning between confessions. By the time dawn painted the windows gold, they had made a decision. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The next weeks were a careful dance of preparation and pretense. Dominic's people worked to identify every tentacle of the network that threatened them, following money trails and electronic footprints that led to places Evelyn did not ask about. She focused on Sophia, maintaining normalcy for the girl while storms gathered on the horizon. Madison attempted contact 3 times, each message more desperate than the last. Evelyn deleted them without reading past the first line. Whatever manipulation the woman was attempting held no power now. The threat materialized on a Tuesday afternoon, arriving in the form of a man named Vincent Crane. He appeared at the estate gates claiming to be a federal investigator, but the predatory gleam in his eyes told a different story. Dominic met him in the formal sitting room, while Evelyn watched from a security monitor, Sophia safely occupied with her tutor in another wing. Crane made threats wrapped in legal language, implying he had evidence of crimes that could put Dominic away for decades. He suggested a deal could be made if certain properties were signed over, if certain businesses were dissolved, if the Santoro name was allowed to fade into obscurity. Dominic listened with remarkable patience, his expression never changing. When Crane finished his speech, Dominic simply smiled. He told Crane that his evidence, whatever it might be, was manufactured. He said he had spent 5 years making sure his operations were clean, documented, and legally defensible. He suggested Crane check with his masters, because whoever was paying him had been given false information. Crane's mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. He warned Dominic that he was making a mistake, that the people he worked for did not accept defeat, that there were other ways to bring a man down. Dominic stood, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the elegant room. He told Crane that threatening him was one thing, but if anyone touched his family, there would be consequences that no amount of money could prevent. The standoff lasted several heartbeats before Crane retreated, his false authority crumbling in the face of real power. Evelyn met Dominic in the corridor afterward, her heart pounding. She asked if it was over. His expression was grim. He said no, that it was just beginning, that men like Crane were never the head of the snake. He was right. Over the following weeks, attacks came from every direction. Business partners suddenly discovered conflicts of interest. Regulatory agencies announced surprise audits. Media outlets received anonymous tips about alleged crimes that generated headlines before investigations could disprove them. Through it all, Dominic fought with the strategic brilliance that had built his empire. He countered every move, anticipated every attack, turned their own tactics against them until the network began to fracture under the weight of its own failures. Evelyn found her own role in the battle. Her years of being invisible, of being underestimated, made her perfect for certain tasks. She attended charity galas on Dominic's arm, her genuine warmth winning allies where his intensity might have created enemies. She noticed things others missed, small details that helped complete larger pictures. She became not just his partner, but his complement, her strengths filling gaps he had not known existed. The turning point came on a rainy night in October when Marcus delivered a folder that changed everything. Marcus, Dominic's most trusted advisor, had been tracking the money behind the attacks for months. The trail led to a name that made Dominic's face turn to stone: Richard Hartley, Madison's father, a man whose legitimate business empire had hidden decades of illegal activity. Hartley had orchestrated everything, using his daughter as a weapon to destroy the family he blamed for his brother's imprisonment 20 years earlier. The brother had been a Santoro associate who had gotten caught in a federal sting, and Hartley had nursed his grudge into a multi-million-dollar revenge operation. Dominic reviewed the evidence with clinical precision, planning countermoves that would dismantle Hartley's operation piece by piece. But it was Evelyn who suggested the strategy that would ultimately end it. She pointed out that Hartley's strength was secrecy, that no one knew he was behind any of this. She asked what would happen if they did know, if his business partners and political connections discovered they had been used as pawns in a personal vendetta. Dominic stared at her, then smiled with fierce admiration. He told her she was magnificent. The plan required precision and patience. They gathered irrefutable documentation of Hartley's schemes, prepared dossiers for every relevant authority, and coordinated the release through channels that could not be traced back to Santoro. When the story broke, it broke everywhere simultaneously. Hartley's empire collapsed in a matter of days. Partners fled. Investigations launched. Politicians who had accepted his donations suddenly discovered urgent needs to distance themselves. Madison attempted to flee the country, but was stopped at the airport, her passport flagged in connection with her father's crimes. Through it all, the Santoro name remained untouched. Dominic had been careful, so careful, to ensure their response stayed within legal boundaries. The man who had once operated in shadows now stood in sunlight, his reputation enhanced rather than damaged by how he had handled the attack. Evelyn watched the news coverage from the library, Sophia curled against her side, while Dominic spoke with his legal team in the next room. The little girl did not understand the details, but she understood that something important had happened. Sophia asked if they were safe now. Evelyn kissed the top of her head. She promised they were, that Uncle Dom had made sure of it. Sophia accepted this with the trust of a child who had never known her uncle to fail her. She asked if Evelyn was going to stay forever. The question hung in the air, weighted with more significance than a child could understand. Evelyn had not let herself think that far ahead, had not dared to assume her place here was permanent. Before she could formulate an answer, Dominic appeared in the doorway. He had heard the question. She could see it in his eyes. He crossed the room and knelt before them both, taking Evelyn's hand in his, while his other arm wrapped around Sophia. He said he had been planning to do this differently, with flowers and candles and a speech he had been practicing for weeks. But this moment felt right, here in their library, with the three of them together. He told Evelyn that she had walked into his life on the worst night of his year, and somehow turned it into the beginning of something beautiful. He said he had spent so long believing he did not deserve love, that his name and his history made him unsuitable for the kind of happiness other people found. His voice cracked slightly as he continued, saying she had proven him wrong. He said she saw past everything to find a man who just wanted to be good, to be worthy, to build something that mattered. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that sparkled like captured starlight. He asked Evelyn to marry him, to be his wife and Sophia's mother and his partner in everything. He asked her to let him spend the rest of his life proving he was worthy of the chance she had given him. Sophia bounced with excitement, whispering encouragement that made them both smile despite the tears in their eyes. Evelyn looked at the ring, at the man, at the little girl who had already claimed space in her heart. She thought of her small apartment in Newark, of her dead-end job, of all the years she had spent feeling like she did not belong anywhere. Then she looked at Dominic, at the hope and vulnerability in his dark eyes, and she knew her answer had been decided the moment she placed her hand in his at the fountain. She said yes. That, of course, the answer was yes, that she wanted nothing more than to spend her life with them. The ring slid onto her finger like it had always belonged there. Sophia cheered and demanded group hugs. Dominic kissed Evelyn with a tenderness that promised a lifetime of such moments. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, streaming through the library windows like a blessing. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the estate gardens on a spring afternoon that felt designed specifically for their happiness. Sophia served as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn dedication. Marcus stood as best man. A handful of guests, the ones who had proven their loyalty through crisis, witnessed the vows that bound two wounded souls together. Evelyn wore a simple white dress she had chosen herself, rejecting the elaborate gowns suggested by well-meaning staff. She did not need crystal and silk to feel beautiful. The way Dominic looked at her when she walked down the aisle provided all the adornment she required. Their vows were personal, written in late-night conversations and morning confessions. Dominic promised to spend every day making her feel as precious as she was. Evelyn promised to stand beside him through whatever storms might come. They both promised to give Sophia the childhood she deserved, full of love and stability and the knowledge that she would never be alone. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Sophia ran to join them, and they lifted her between them, a family forged not by blood, but by choice. The reception lasted until stars appeared overhead, guests departing with warm wishes and genuine joy. When the last car disappeared down the long driveway, Dominic and Evelyn stood on the terrace where they had first met, looking out at the gardens that had witnessed their beginning. He asked if she was happy. Evelyn leaned into him, feeling his arm wrap around her shoulders with familiar comfort. She said she had not known it was possible to be this happy, that for so long she had believed happiness was something that happened to other people. He turned her to face him, cradling her face in his hands. He told her she deserved every happiness, that he would spend his life making sure she never doubted her worth again. They stayed there as the moon rose, talking about the future in a way neither had been able to before. Plans for expanding the legitimate businesses, dreams of travel to places Evelyn had only read about, discussions of siblings for Sophia, of the family they would build together. The months that followed were a montage of moments Evelyn tucked into her heart like treasures. Summer afternoons, teaching Sophia to swim in the estate pool. Autumn evenings curled together in the library while rain painted the windows. Winter mornings when Dominic kept his promise of Sunday pancakes, flour somehow always ending up on his nose. She returned to Newark exactly once to collect her few meaningful possessions and sign the papers releasing her from her apartment lease. Standing in the tiny space that had been her home for 3 years, she felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led her away from it. Her mother called occasionally, her tone shifting from dismissive to interested, as news of Evelyn's marriage reached her through mutual acquaintances. Evelyn was polite but distant, unwilling to grant access to her happiness to someone who had never valued her unhappiness. The first anniversary of that strange, wonderful night at Madison's wedding arrived with spring flowers and longer days. Dominic surprised Evelyn with a weekend trip to a cottage on the coast, leaving Sophia in Marcus's capable care, with promises of extra ice cream and horse rides. They walked on the beach as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The waves whispered against the sand and seabirds called overhead, and Evelyn thought she had never known such peace. Dominic held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. He told her he had news if she was ready to hear it. Her heart skipped. She asked what kind of news. He explained that the last threads of the network that had attacked them had been cut. Hartley was facing trial. Madison had accepted a plea deal that included cooperation against her father, and every associate who had participated in their schemes had been identified and neutralized. He said it was over, truly over, and they were finally free. Evelyn stopped walking, turning to face him fully. She searched his eyes for shadows and found only light. She said she had not realized how much weight she had been carrying until he said that. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. He told her he knew, that he had felt it too, but now they could stop looking over their shoulders and start looking ahead. She kissed him with a year's worth of gratitude and a lifetime's worth of hope. When they returned to the estate, Sophia greeted them with artwork she had made during their absence, a drawing of 3 figures holding hands beneath a rainbow, labeled in careful letters as "My Family." Evelyn hung it in the kitchen, where she would see it every morning, a daily reminder of the impossible gift she had been given. The nightmares that had once plagued her sleep faded into distant memories. The voice that had whispered she was not good enough grew quieter, eventually falling silent altogether. In its place grew something new: confidence, belonging, the bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She found purpose in unexpected places. The charity foundation she established with Dominic's support provided scholarships to students from backgrounds like her own, kids who had been told they would never amount to anything. She visited schools and community centers, sharing her story and watching hope kindle in young eyes. The second year brought change and growth. Sophia started a new school where she flourished, making friends and discovering a talent for art that Evelyn nurtured with supplies and encouragement. The business continued its transition into legitimacy, with Dominic's name appearing in news articles about philanthropy and community development rather than whispered rumors. And then, on a morning that felt like any other, Evelyn woke with a certainty that changed everything. She found Dominic in his study, reviewing documents with the focused intensity she had come to love. She asked if he had a minute. He looked up immediately, setting aside his work with the attention he always gave her. She told him she had something to tell him, something she had suspected for a few weeks but had confirmed that morning. His brow furrowed with concern. He asked if everything was all right. She smiled, tears already forming in her eyes. She told him everything was more than all right, that she was pregnant, that they were going to have a baby. The documents fell forgotten to the floor. Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms with a reverence that took her breath away. He asked if she was sure, his voice rough with emotion. She laughed through her tears. She told him she had taken 3 tests just to be certain. He pulled back to look at her face, and she saw her own joy reflected in his eyes, magnified and returned in equal measure. He said they were going to have a baby, repeating the words like he needed to hear them again to believe them. Sophia's reaction to the news was everything they could have hoped for. She demanded to know if it would be a boy or a girl, declared she wanted a sister, but would accept a brother if necessary, and immediately began planning how she would teach the baby to ride horses and read books. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, each milestone marked with celebration. Evelyn documented everything: the first ultrasound, the first kick, the growing curve of her belly that Dominic touched with wonder every morning. The nursery took shape in the room adjacent to their suite, painted in soft yellows and greens that would welcome any child. The baby arrived on a snowy December night, a daughter with her father's dark hair and her mother's gentle eyes. They named her Grace for the undeserved gift they had found in each other. Holding her daughter for the first time, Evelyn thought of the woman she had been 3 years ago, crying alone at a fountain, believing her life would never amount to anything. That woman could never have imagined this moment, a husband who adored her, a stepdaughter who called her Mom, a baby in her arms, a home filled with love. Dominic sat beside her on the hospital bed, one arm around her shoulders, his free hand gently touching Grace's tiny fingers. He said she was perfect, then added that they were perfect, that he did not have words for how full his heart was. Evelyn leaned into him, exhausted and elated in equal measure. She told him she understood, that she felt it too, that this fullness she had been searching for her whole life, without knowing what she was looking for. Sophia met her sister the next morning, approaching the baby with a seriousness that made the adults smile. She declared that Grace was acceptable and asked when they could take her home to show her the horses. They brought Grace home to an estate that had been transformed for the holidays, lights twinkling in every window and a tree in the main hall that touched the ceiling. The staff, who had become family, welcomed the newest member with gifts and good wishes. Marcus, who had watched Dominic's transformation with quiet approval, held the baby with surprising gentleness and declared she would grow up to be trouble, just like her father. The years unfolded like chapters in a book Evelyn had never dared to imagine writing. Grace grew into a curious, confident child, with Sophia as her devoted guardian and guide. The sisters, separated by age but bound by love, developed a bond that warmed everyone who witnessed it. Dominic kept his promises, every one of them. He remained present and devoted, balancing business demands with family dinners and bedtime stories. He never missed a school play or a riding lesson. He told Evelyn she was beautiful when she felt anything but, and made her believe it through consistent devotion. The Santoro name became synonymous with philanthropy and community development. The foundation grew, touching thousands of lives. Dominic spoke at conferences about second chances and redemption, his story inspiring others who had believed their pasts defined their futures. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Evelyn found herself standing at the very fountain where it had all begun. The gardens looked the same, the marble figures still intertwined, the roses still climbing their trellises, but she was unrecognizable from the woman who had sat there crying a decade ago. Dominic joined her, threading his fingers through hers with the ease of long practice. He said he still remembered finding her here, that he had thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, even with tears streaming down her face. Evelyn laughed softly. She told him she had thought he was terrifying, that she had almost run away. He smiled, the expression still capable of making her heart skip after all these years. He said he was glad she did not run, that chasing her would have ruined the moment. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the fountain's gentle music, remembering the improbable path that had brought them here. Sophia appeared with Grace in tow, both girls demanding attention for some urgent matter involving the horses. The spell broke, replaced by the beautiful chaos of family life. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Evelyn lay in Dominic's arms and thought about everything she had gained. She told him she was happy, that she wanted him to know that every day she woke up amazed that this was her life. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. He told her he was happy too, that she had given him a life he never knew he wanted. They fell asleep tangled together, as they had for 10 years, as they would for decades to come. The mocking laughter at that wedding felt like a lifetime ago, delivered by people who no longer held any power over her. Madison had faded into obscurity, her schemes exposed, her beauty diminished by bitterness. Jessica and Brittany had scattered to unremarkable lives, their cruelty forgotten by everyone but perhaps themselves. Evelyn had risen above them all, not through revenge but through something far more satisfying, genuine happiness. She had entered a stranger's garden broken and alone. She had left it with a love that rewrote everything she believed about herself. Some stories end with the villain defeated. This one ended with something rarer and more precious, a woman who finally understood that she had always been worth loving, and a man who would spend his life making sure she never forgot it. If you have watched this far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end." This way I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Did this story touch your heart? Then subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any of our emotional narratives. Hit the notification bell to be the first to know when new stories arrive. If this story made you feel something, leave a like to help more people discover these moments of emotion. And share with someone who needs to believe that love can change everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching until the end. Until the next story.